Good day, this is Terry Difazio, and you're watching Dial It Up. Our guest today is health educator Amy Hornblas. Amy is a frequent flyer here on this show, and it's always good to have you on, Amy.
Thank you so much, Terry, for letting me come back.
Let's get right to it.
Okay.
We have a whole lot of things to cover, but what is the status of your survey as of right now compared to when you started? You started about a year ago, wasn't it, a year and a half?
In July of 2020, yep,
Okay.
I started gathering evidence of the harms that masks were causing to Vermonters, this universal community use of masks amongst everybody. What were some of the harms that was causing? And I surveyed people on the harms that are known and expected according to the World Health Organization and OSHA and the FDA and everyone else. So I just surveyed people on the things we would expect would happen. And so I gathered results, and I came out with a final report in May. I've sent that to all of the press, to all of the health departments. I've been bringing it to school boards. I've been bringing it to every community group that I can think of that will let me bring it. And I've been just traveling around with it widely. And then, of course, over the summer, kind of the shift has gone to schools. Because, you know, my survey is based on adults, and I've done a lot of research based on adults, but we know that there are harms that masks can cause to adults. We don't know what they can do to children because this is a brand new experiment. And the only evidence that we've been able to gather over the past year clearly shows that children are experiencing the expected harms, including oxygen deficiency, carbon dioxide poisoning, things that we would expect. And so I was really surprised to find that, you know, based on the CDC's suggestion that masks may help prevent the spread of COVID, the Agency of Education in our state has recommended that schools implement universal masking. And so now it's become up to the school boards and superintendents, our neighbors, our elected local officials, to make that decision. And they're being, you know, threatened with, of course, losing funding if they don't. And they are, you know, being threatened with, oh, you won't be protected legally if any harm comes and you don't follow these recommendations. But ultimately, they're the ones making the decisions. So what I've been working on now is going to them, bringing this information because they need to be informed. And right now, there is no discussion of the harms caused by masks, and that concerns me.
You bring up a very good point because there's somebody right here in Newport, and his child is being kept out of class because she has a medical exemption from wearing a mask, and the superintendent of the North Country Supervisory Union and the principal, I think maybe the principal of that school, I'm not sure, but they're having her go off into the nurse's office and meet with a guidance counselor, not allowed to go to class.
Not even be integrated. So
Right.
so there's this segregation that is going on in our society right now, and it's a segregation. It started based on masks. And I was really concerned because, of course, there are people with pre-existing conditions. Of course, all the research shows this, that the harms can definitely be worse for people with pre-existing conditions. And our health department, our health commissioner has given no warnings about that. They have not reinforced the need for those exemptions. It's just been just comply. Compliance has been the main goal. And so we've already sort of segregated people based on masks, and I found evidence of that in my survey. People who can't ride the bus, can't access public services because they can't wear a mask. And so we've already had that segregation going on. Now masks are, what it appears to me, based on my research, are being used the way they've been used in healthcare settings to coerce healthcare workers into getting their annual flu vaccines. Well, now these masks are being used in school settings and workplace settings all across Vermont in order to coerce people into getting this COVID vaccine. And again, we're going to have a segregation. We're already talking about segregating people based on this. I'm really concerned. And so a lot of what I've been working on, too, over the last couple weeks has been humanizing ourselves to our neighbors. If these decisions are being made locally by our neighbors, they are humans in these positions of power, these school boards, superintendents. They're humans for a reason. They're supposed to use their human heart, their human mind. They're supposed to look at the research themselves, and that's all I'm asking people to do, is actually look at the research, not go based on suggestions, unless you know what those suggestions are based on and you agree. That's why you're a human in this position. And another thing I've been doing is breathing celebrations in front of the schools, where I've been going out with some of my neighbors, and we've just been promoting healthy breathing, that breathing is healthy, in front of schools and in front of supervisory unions, to let people know how many folks agree with this statement. It's a common sense fact, and to humanize ourselves to our neighbors, because right now there's a stereotype about people who question masks. There's a stereotype about people who don't get vaccines, right? There's stereotype about people who believe in certain political things, and they're all getting sort of mixed up. And so I'm just focusing right in on the masks, where the evidence is clear, and I'm coming out as a caring human, which my community members know I am. I've been teaching health in these communities for decades, and about sensitive, important topics, and caring about kids every single day. And so we need to be humans, because folks just hear that you're questioning masks and they stereotype you. They shut you down. They don't.
Yes, you're automatically a Trump supporter too.
Right, a million other things. Right, you're already a million other things in their mind, and we aren't putting care into our communities right now, and we really need to, because at the end of the day, that's what counts.
I'm very upset about the fact that it's been so politicized, simply because when people say, "Oh, you're anti-mask," therefore you must be a Trump supporter, or you must be this supporter, when I didn't vote for either one of them. So, and it's really kind of...
Me either, exactly.
It's kind of silly. How have you been treated with regard to government agencies and or school boards? How have they treated you?
Either no response at all, or negative responses for the most part. I had one school board member who showed some interest, asked a question. I sent them more information. I haven't heard back. Mostly it's no response or negative responses, being called a conspiracy theorist, of course, and no debate. See, this is where it's so completely unscientific. Nobody's presenting me with primary sources. If I'm wrong, which I can be, I'm wrong. I make mistakes all the time. I'm a layperson reading this information. I'm doing my best to sift through it and weigh the evidence, the primary source evidence, look at the data, how did they get the data, and look at the conclusions. And if I'm wrong, and if the governor is so certain that he's right, and Dr. Levine is so certain that he's right, and my superintendent is so certain that he's right, they're so convinced. I mean, I'm a great learner. Teach me, show me the evidence. And I'm going right on the CDC website, and I am reading their evidence, and it concludes that it's not conclusive, of course, and that they actually can cause harm. What they cite actually proves harm. So I'm not sure what I'm missing here, and this lack of engagement, it's just a great way of shutting down the discussion, so then we can never actually look at the data, and we can never actually tease this apart. And this is getting dangerous, because right now we've not only implemented masks, we've implemented social distancing, we've implemented shutdowns, now vaccines, now boosters, mixtures. And this was
supposed to be a 3-week to flatten the curve.
Right.
Now it's 18, 19 months later.
And how will we ever, if one of these things, which are all experimental, if one of them is wrong, which the data is really not clear on any of them, really. If you actually read the primary, there are questions and debates about all of it. How will we ever tease apart what caused what and to what extent? And, so I'm really worried that, if we aren't even aware of the harms, and if we aren't addressing them, which we could be applying just basic OSHA standards to mask use the way that we would apply it if they were PPE. The only reason OSHA's not applying their standards and their protections to people who wear face masks in community settings is because they're not PPE. They don't work. They're not PPE. They're not appropriate according to World Health Organization here. Non-medical masks are not considered appropriate for protection of healthcare workers when working in patient care areas. The material thickness and weaving standards of these masks varies widely. Hence, the barrier, the filtration efficiency against microorganisms passing through the fabric is unknown. This is in December, okay, and nothing new has come out to confirm this. In addition, non-medical masks are often designed with multiple layers of hydrophilic materials such as cotton, and thus may retain moisture, become contaminated, and act as a potential source of infection to a wearer. Although current recommendations advise the use of synthetic hydrophobic materials on the outer layer, the overall use of non-medical masks is for source control purposes. And this is confirmed by the FDA and everyone else. It's only to protect others, right? Remember how it all shifted once the science was coming and people were looking at the science and going, wait a minute. The government had to admit that this is only for source purposes. There is no current evidence to show that these masks perform adequately or consistently as PPE. I mean, period. Like, that's it. That is the World Health Organization. That's what every authority says on the matter. So we're having people at best, if they even work for source for big droplets, keeping the person from emitting big droplets, we're asking children to wear these to protect others. Do you understand? I mean, I'm just not, if it's causing harm, and we know that it is, the evidence that we have, which I can get into here in a minute. So it is very concerning to me.
One of the things I'm noticing now is more and more places are having more and more protests. For example, Justin Trudeau, he was in Ontario a couple of days ago, and people were actually throwing dirt and gravel at him.
Yeah.
They were fed up with him. Right.
Well, see, people understand, right? You said 2 weeks to flatten the curve. So recently I was looking at the latest CDC report on all-cause mortality. How many people in our country have died, and how does that compare to normal, right? Have more people died in 2020 than normal? Well, up until the end of March of last year, less people were dying than normal.
Mm-hmm. It's funny how the flu has disappeared. Nobody gets the flu anymore.
Right. And so we implemented the lockdowns and the social distancing like the second week of March. So 2 weeks to flatten the curve brings you to what? From March 14th to March 28th. Guess what? On March 28th, our all-cause mortality started to rise above normal. Mm-hmm. And it continued to rise above normal. As we implemented masks, it continued to rise above normal. It went down during the summer, which it always does. Flus, go down during the summer. That's a natural curve. And then last fall, implementing vaccines on top of more mask use, on top of more lockdowns, on top of more stress and loneliness, which we know hurts people. Yep. It's through the roof.
And depression.
Right.
Yes,
so
absolutely.
how are we ever, now that we've got all these factors that we know, our CDC, our Surgeon General a few years ago listed loneliness as the biggest cause of excess death. So how are we ever going to tease out, what was it, the masks that did that? What was it? We need to start doing research, and that's all I'm doing. Mm-hmm. As I've been, the World Health Organization says that decision makers who are going to implement mask use, because this is a new thing, need to be looking carefully at the data and need to be collecting data on the harms so that they can do a fair cost-risk analysis, especially amongst their use amongst children and people with special needs and health conditions. And that's what I'm doing. Yeah. And so some people have said, well, who are you to do this? And all these kinds of things. Well, the government isn't doing it. I've got better things to do with my time. I have a garden and a life. I'm not doing this for me. I'm doing this because no one else is. Mm-hmm. And we really need to be collecting this data.
Well, it's funny you mentioned the CDC. If anybody tells me, well, the CDC recommends this or this, I just remind them of the Tuskegee experiment. And when they find out what that really was, they're actually horrified at what it was. But by the same token, the CDC has done made a whole lot of recommendations over the years that we now know are just absolutely dumb. Yeah. Smoking.
Well, we make mistakes. Smoking.
Smoking is good for you. Using
aspirin during the Spanish flu. Mm-hmm. Aspirin, which Bayer held the patent for up until the year before the Spanish flu, when their patent ran out, suddenly all these other aspirin companies pop up. All of a sudden, Bayer's now competing with all these other aspirin companies. Imagine the advertising right? The advertising, use aspirin for this, that, and the other thing. Along comes this flu that not only the Army Corps, medical team, but everyone else was dumping toxic doses of aspirin onto these people who had the flu. If you take aspirin with a fever, we now know. It took till 1960 for the evidence to finally become clear and be admitted by the general public that if you take aspirin during a fever, your lungs are going to probably fill up with fluid and you're going to die of pneumonia.
Mm-hmm.
How many people did we kill with aspirin? Just the dosage on the bottle was toxic. It would have been toxic, especially for children. Mm-hmm. And who died the most during the Spanish flu? Children and young people. And we wondered, why? Why are all these young people? If you look at it with that lens. So we are constantly making health mistakes. And we need to be...
By comparing this flu and 2020, when this supposedly started, comparing it to something that happened a century ago, to me it almost is like the medical profession is admitting they haven't done anything to better themselves, and we should be just as afraid because they can't really help.
I know, but then there's and here's the good news. So I feel bad that I've been sort of on this negative tear since we started our conversation, because I'm actually feeling really positive. Because as I stand on the side of the street with my signs, all right, and with my friends, that breathing is healthy, unmask the kids, let's see, love your neighbor, which is a really fun one. That's actually really popular. And we've got all these great, fun, happy signs, because I'm a health educator. I understand, you got to have a positive message, and you don't want to frighten kids, of course, but they need to know. Nobody's telling them, just like you would tell someone who had to wear a dust mask for work. OSHA would require you to talk with them about the warning signs, about any health conditions, and to let you know if they have any of these warning signs. Well, we're not telling kids this. They are completely unaware. They've been stressed out by this whole thing, right? They've been stressed out by the news, by their parents being stressed, by being isolated from their friends and family. Just the schools shutting down a year ago was horrifying and horribly stressful. That I worried so much about that. We have not been prioritizing the children through any of this. And so, wearing masks every day in school, that just brings this whole awareness of this, virus every day to them, and that's lowering their immune systems. So I'm trying to get this positive message out there. And the good news is, Terry, here's the best news.
All right.
Drum roll, although I don't want to bang on the table. Drum roll, please, is as I stand out there with the signs and with my friends, 50-1 is my estimation, and it's not scientific, okay, this is just my estimation. 50-1 people understand this message. Mm-hmm. You know why? Because they've been the ones wearing the masks, They've been wearing them all year at work and at school and having to wear these things. And anyone who has to wear them for a prolonged period of time, most people will tell you that they experience difficulties. Mm-hmm. And so people know, everybody knows, kind of like the jig is up, is that the saying? Like we get it. And so 50-1, the people who drive by are beeping their horns, they're cheering, they're giving thumbs up, big smiles. The problem is people don't know that statistic, right? They think they're the only crazy person going by, and oh gosh, yeah, we're conspiracy theorists together because we're the only ones who think this way. That's not true. Most people get it, but there's this fear factor, right? People are even afraid to, join me and stand out in many cases because they're afraid of what their neighbors will think. Will they lose business at their business? Will their kids be stigmatized at school, and maybe in some ways like punished through the system? And I mean, that's frightening. If we really feel that by speaking about just a basic health issue that people need to breathe is going to somehow endanger you, there's nothing to fear but fear itself. I say we just call that out. And I'm finding it's not true at all.
Of the people that I know personally that have had this virus, the vast majority are mask wearers, social distancers, and quarantiners.
We need to be tracking this data. Yeah. That could very well be true, Terry. We don't know because Dr. Levine has actually been asked, are you tracking, when you track COVID cases, are you asking about mask use? And he said no. So we're not even, they don't want to look at certain information. They don't want to collect certain information because then you would have to admit
that you were wrong.
Right. And just like Dr. Levine's own study that he did do with UVM found that masks were increasing the spread of COVID. And that's what all the research shows. That's what we know about cloth masks and these non-PPE. They're not even actually PPE. They're not protective, and they gather, bacteria.
It seems funny that the people who wear masks seem to be more afraid of catching it than the people that don't.
Right, and whether it's so, if we were to, this is the kind of science I would love to do this kind of research, and somebody needs to. How would we tease apart? Is it their concern and worry about catching it? That is constantly, they're reminding themselves every time they put this talisman. It's just a superstitious talisman. Every time they put it on their face, they're reminding themselves. They're sending a message to their immune systems. And I'm really aware of how we have a lot of research showing that your mental state and your beliefs and your thoughts have a lot to do with your health condition.
Yeah, I know Rand Paul called it theater.
Yeah, well, and how would we ever tease apart? Was it the masks, the structural mask, or was it the mental, the placebo effect of putting it on? That's going to take a lot of research, and we need to start doing.
There also seems to be a more concern from people who are vaccinated are worried than people that aren't vaccinated. I refuse to be worried about it, and I still feel that this should be a choice. Mm-hmm. But it's funny, if this vaccine is so good and is so safe and is so helpful, then why are people being bribed and or coerced to get it?
Right.
And I don't understand that at all. My wife and I have very good luck with vaccines. We got it. We didn't have any side effects from it. But that's our choice. Mm-hmm. We don't ever go to somebody and say, well, you should get this. Mm-hmm. We don't say that. But that's your choice.
Right.
If they ask our opinion, say, hey, we got it. We didn't have any effects. We know people who've had some very bad side effects. Mm-hmm. So I don't understand why the vaccinated people are more worried than the people that aren't.
Right. And why we would ask children to risk their health to protect a vaccinated teacher, for example. When kids are at such low risk, of getting it. Of course, now we've got, Delta complicates things, but how will we know if Delta is being exacerbated by these masks?
We already have 3 variants that they've conveniently come out with. The Delta, the Lambda, and the Mu have all come out. And I find this interesting about Dr. Fauci. He's always got a trap door or a back door to fall out of when you catch him on something. Mm-hmm. And it's always these variants. Well, yes, all viruses have variants.
They do.
So do we wear a mask for everything?
Right.
So I don't understand this. Are you seeing any attitude changes since you started doing this survey?
Well, I think this is what the good news is that most people do get it. Yes, and I'm seeing a big attitude change at the end of this summer, coming into the fall, and asking children to wear masks all the time, asking frontline workers and working class people to put these masks back on at the grocery store and at all the places, right, and all the workplaces after they were allowed to take them off for a little while. People are done. People are done. They understand that this is not helping their health, especially, say, if you have asthma, which about 10% of our population here in Vermont has serious asthma, uncontrolled asthma, and we are requiring them, in order to keep their job or in order to go to school, to wear these masks that may have harmful particles in them. They may be made of dangerous materials. We have a lot of research about washing the cloth masks and how that breaks them down. We aren't giving any information to the public. Or let me take that back. The government and agencies that are and employers who are requiring the use of these masks in order to access these services, they're giving no warnings about this. Why wouldn't they? If masks do work and they do believe, well, then let's at least warn pregnant women, to not wear them, because the research shows that's not a good idea. Let's at least warn people with asthma and put the word out that, where's the care? I'm not seeing care. We have this is all supposedly about health. It's all supposedly about proving that you care, but I'm not seeing actual care happen. When someone with a COPD attack is picked up in an ambulance, they're supposed to put a mask on them. Mm-hmm. All right, so we've got, and if you want, we can get into the data of that. It's very clear that it restricts breathing. It would be like restricting any other organ in your body. We know that N95s restrict breathing by about 37%. We don't know how much these cloth and paper masks restrict. Probably more because they're gathering moisture, which makes it harder to breathe. So probably more than 37%. But let's just take that, a third, okay? If you restricted any other organ of your body by a third for 6 hours a day, let's say your kidneys, let's just restrict them by a third for 6 hours of a day. Let's restrict your bladder. Let's restrict your skin. Let's just cover your skin with some kind of unbreathable material. A third of it for 6 hours. We know. I mean, we don't have to do a lot of research. We can just sit here at this table and agree that would probably have some serious health consequences, especially with prolonged use. And so people are getting this because they're living through this experiment and they understand. And we just need to help them have the strength and courage, because if we just keep going along with things that aren't healthy for us because we're afraid to stand up for ourselves, I don't think things are going to get better if we keep acting that way, right? And courage takes practice. You have to practice saying no naturally to us. I used to teach consent and boundaries and teach people how to stand up for their boundaries and safety skills, and it takes practice. So I suggest that people start practicing.
What is next for you and for this survey?
Well, to continue to bring this information about, OSHA standards and kids and carbon dioxide poisoning and oxygen deficiency. I'm sticking right to, I think a basic truth. And here right now with how confusing everything is getting, with all these different strategies we're implementing, with all these different variants, and we don't really have any evidence. We're flying by the seat of our pants on all these issues, and the news coming at us with feelings that we're supposed to have, and segregation and separation and all this confusion. To me, I think if we need to start with just basic fundamental truths. We need to get back there, and that's what I love about science, is the science is still very clear. If people actually read the data, which I do encourage people to actually check their facts and read the data and see what it says, you'll see that it's very clear that we need to breathe. And we need to breathe unrestricted air for the health of our respiratory system. And that's just a basic fact. So I'm really just trying to bring us so that we can find some common ground and rebuild our communities, because through this process, what most people have been worried about is the segregation factor. It's the stereotyping, the prejudice that is now alive. It's like, I was talking with a woman the other day who said, I don't know if my neighbor would have sold me, this load of firewood if they knew that I felt this way about masks. Like, I'm afraid to tell them because I'm afraid my own neighbors won't treat me. And I said, well, it's kind of like racism. It's like any other kind of prejudice, and only now it's like based on, it doesn't matter, what your external factors are. People can prejudice you for your thoughts. And some people have even said, you're worrying. I've had 2 people approach me and say that I've been, out of all the hundreds and hundreds of beeps and thumbs up and cheers and thank yous and I love yous and all these great responses, I have had a couple of negative responses, from the community. And one was very respectful, but just letting me know, like, that he didn't understand. Why are you worrying the kids with this? And I thought, wow, is this where we're at? That by saying breathing is healthy, I'm the one hurting kids now. I mean, do you understand how far we've gone?
Yes,
I am
definitely.
not the one who sent the kids home in the middle of March 2020. I would have walked through fire and put my life on the line to stay in that school and protect those kids, right? I am not the one who put masks on everybody so that everyone all day long now worries about COVID, when there's nothing in your environment to remind you could have had a normal day and breathed normally and had a normal heart rate and been healthier, right? I am not the one who's fear-mongering every night on the news and putting fear. That is the opposite of what you want to do if you want people to be healthy.
Exactly.
I'm not the one who's putting masks on people with oxygen requirements in the hospital, or making people with asthma show up to their $10 an hour job and wear a mask all day that probably has dangerous nanoparticles and things. We know this. But I'm now the one who. Do you see how it's like? Whoa! And that's what scares people. Everybody senses that. But it's a very simple thing to solve.
Right.
You know, really just up to us. It's not up to the media or changing the data or changing anybody's minds. We just need to realize that we get this. Mm-hmm. We get this, and we're in this together, and we need to humanize ourselves with each other.
Amy, I want to thank you for coming on again.
Yeah,
We've run out of time.
Oh, geez, all right.
And we could go for an hour and a half, I suppose. Mm-hmm. But thank you so much, and we will see you again soon, I hope.
Yes, thank you.
This is Terry Difazio for Dial It Up, saying if you don't like the answers you get here, don't bother asking the questions. We'll catch you later.